60 Apache warriors waiting for him up on the sides. So there are some up there, some over here. Good morning. I'm headed into the Black Range again today. Seems like I've been doing that a lot lately. Now I'm flying solo as usual, but I got a couple pack animals and a dog. But I am going up Railroad Canyon. So this is the trailhead. Well, you pretty much just start and there's a campground right here. And so we'll go check it out. There's some snow up here, so we'll see what it's like up on top. The set of pins right here is always a good reference. You know that whenever you hit that, you're almost back to the truck. So there's this junction right here. It's not too far up. I think it's a mile and a half or something. This trail goes up the ridge, and it actually ties into the crest up at the top, and you can loop around. So it's actually a pretty good little day ride. You just make that little loop. Not a full day, probably like a half day type deal. I came up this trail last summer with my kids, and I could have made it further, but the trail is pretty rough, and so with little kids I thought it was a little bit too much, so we only made it to about that junction back there. But a couple months ago some volunteers came in and they cleared this trail, so that's one of the reasons why I'm going this way, is just to check it out, see their work. So far it's been pretty good. I've had to clear a little bit of stuff out of the way that's fallen recently, but that's just typical. You can't get around that here. So I'm just headed up the canyon. We're only 4 3/4 miles from Hillsborough Peak. But we're going to Holden Prong. So this trail goes up, ties up to the top up there. I don't think it's been cleared that I know of. Bobcat tracks. made it to the crest. So right here is the crest trail. I came up Railroad Canyon that way. This way is Holden Prong. So if you take this back, you can get to Hillsborough Peak. And if you go this way, you're kind of going towards McKnight, that kind of area. It looks like somebody was camped here. I'm pretty sure they didn't make all those cuts with a handsaw. This used to be a huge aspen grove right here, just covered in aspens. Now it's just covered in locusts. There's a pretty cool waterfall right here. The trail's actually, it's pretty good, but there's a lot of rocks and tread work that needs to be done. So this last, I don't know, 1/8 of a mile, I've been having to roll rocks and stuff out of the way. But if you want to come in, it's going to be clear for you. Clear-ish. There's so much of this stuff where if they didn't just clear it out, it would be a nightmare to get around. So I appreciate it. You can tell that this wasn't even the old trail. They had to make a new trail. And it's been like this for a while. Here's a tough one. They started to cut this tree out. They didn't quite finish, so now I gotta figure out a workaround. Alright. The trail just kind of works its way down. You go around those big boulders, and then you have to climb up here on top, and you switchbacks a couple times. If they didn't clear it, there's no way you would have made it, or I would have made it on a horse. It would have been one of those walking situations, pretty rough. But they haven't done any tread work, which is fine. It's still rough, but it makes it where you can at least make it through. So I appreciate them logging and doing a lot of brushing. It's a big rocky canyon. Probably can't see it, but right in there there's a cave, and then right next to it there's the little walls, old cliff dwelling. Those kind of things are all over the place. There's another trail that goes up the bottom of this, but I don't know how good of shape it's in. I'm guessing it's a lot worse than this one was, but this one's making it. It's not real fast, but we're pecking through everything. But it is a huge help that they did a bulk of the work already. The canyon's opening up, so this is turning into the Animas, which I guess technically still is the Animas, but this is Sid's prong of the Animas. I came down Holden prong of the Animas. So there's another trail that goes up here. I haven't been on it in a really long time. I have no idea what kind of shape it's in. It's probably pretty rough, but it just kind of ties into the top up at the crest. Not too far down from Sid's prong here, there's another trail that I've never been on that goes up here, and it goes to McKnight Peak. So I don't know anything about it. Looks like a rough canyon though, so I'm sure it's quite the adventure if you want to try it. So opening up. Somebody had some mules tied right there, some horses. Water Canyon Trail number 120. Black Range Crest is 5.5 miles. Holden Prong Saddle, where I came from, is 6. And Murphy Place, a half mile from it. This right here is Murphy Place. So it's an old homestead, and it's kind of an older homestead from like the early 1800s. So most homesteads that you see, they're going to be 60s to 1860s to 80s, kind of in there. I think that this one's older than that. And there used to be a cabin right here, but it burned up. There's still like parts of the bed and stuff, but there's some remnants of corrals and stuff. I'll walk you around here and let you see it. So there were some corrals down here on the bottom, and then there's some more up there. You can see cubs and whatnot. So they would use this, everybody just called it Murphy Place, and so they would gather cows, and then they would put them in these holding pens while they were gathering, and then once they got the whole group together, then they would push them down the canyon. And they were doing this into the probably 50s or 60s, and so, you know, it sounds like a long time ago now, but in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty recent. There's still some cows in here somewhere. Right here out of Murphy's Place, there's a trail that goes up right here to Victorio Park, or Vic's Park. And the worst trip, I shouldn't say, I don't know, worst is the right word. The roughest trip I've ever been on involved that trail and horses and mules rolling off mountains, and just a huge wreck. Biggest wreck I've ever been involved with was right there on that trail. I hope I never recreate that situation again. It's a pretty cool place right here though. Like I said, this is a good place to camp. Depending on which map and who you're talking to, this mountain, or there's a park up there, it's called either Victorio or Victoria Park. And it's named after Victorio the Apache, but people got it mixed up with Victoria, and so now it's kind of 50-50 on what people call it. Like that trail on the sign, it said Vic's Park, so that'd be short probably for Victoria, and then on that sign it even said Victoria. So I guess you can mistakenly change the name and people just go with it. Doesn't really matter, but it's pretty cool up there. Used to be a lot different. It used to be tall pines, and now it's locusts and burnt trees and a bunch of weeds growing. It's kind of sad. People do strange things. Maybe it's not strange if you were there, but why? You might need a trailer. It's cheap. You can't come into this area without talking about the Buffalo Soldiers. So if you're not familiar with Buffalo Soldiers, what they were was right after the Civil War, there were a bunch of African Americans that wanted to join the army, and so they made a couple regiments. They're mostly African American. Some of the officers were white, but there were the 9th Battalion, which was a Buffalo Soldier battalion, was stationed, well, they were stationed around this area, and their whole job was to help settlers work their way west for protection, building infrastructure, things like that. And as you can imagine, they kind of got the short end of the stick on everything. Their horses weren't very good. Their uniforms were kind of leftover Civil War uniforms. Their guns weren't the best, but they just kind of made do with what they had. And they did a pretty good job. So this area of Fort Baird was Buffalo Soldiers did a lot there. Fort Stratton, kind of in the middle of the state. And then of course all of these other little forts that are around here. But those were kind of the main ones. This right here behind me is East Curtis. There's a trail in here from there. So you can ride over the top. It ties into a forest road, kind of over by Kingston area. I have it on good report that it is really brushy and covered in locusts. So yeah, it needs some work. There's the monument right here. I'm gonna camp just down from it. I'm just down the creek from the monument. This is the Kelsey place, where everybody just calls it the Kelsey. So another homestead, but there's a road that actually comes up to this. So in the wilderness, if you look on a map, there's a little chunk right here that's not wilderness anymore. And so you can get to it from the ladder, and you could still make it. It might be a little bit rough, but in a four-wheel drive vehicle, maybe lift it a little bit, you'd be able to make it up here. And so they used to, or they probably still do, they'd gather everything up at Murphy's place, drive them down here, and then they would truck them out. So now you'd probably have to drive them all the way down to the ranch. But another place, a lot of history there. But yeah, it's still part of the Ladder Ranch, which is huge. Ted Turner owns it. It's kind of a big thing. Another pretty cool place. In 1879, they had captured Victorio, who was part of the Warm Springs Apache Band. Well, they had him on different reservations. They had him over in Arizona and he escaped there. Then they brought him over to the Mescalero Reservation in New Mexico and he escaped. But when he escaped, he came back to this area because this was his old stomping grounds. and he started raiding a lot. And so he was raiding over in Hillsboro, and he was every ranch or homestead that they would come across, they would raid, and the stuff that they would do was kind of unspeakable. They'd pretty much kill everybody, steal everything. And so the Buffalo Soldiers were part of trying to catch him again. And they knew that he had a place, a camp, up here at Victoria Park's Peak. And this was kind of one of their bigger camps, so it was a pretty good clue, because just right before that he had hit Hillsboro and that kind of area. And so the 9th Cavalry, they kind of split up, and a couple companies were coming up the river, and a couple of them were coming down the river here on Animas. And as they were headed towards Victoria Peak, or Victoria Park's Peak. As they were working their way up the river here, they saw, depending on which version of the story, either a woman, an Apache woman, or 2 Apaches. And if there's 2 Apaches, they shot at them, and if it was just a woman, she just took off running. And so she went running up into this canyon right here. The Buffalo Soldiers had some Navajo scouts with them, and they said, "Don't go," but they did. And so I'm gonna take you up there where the Buffalo Soldiers were chasing that Apache woman. They chased him up the canyon, and then they got him to go into this side draw here. The cavalry was lured into here, still on horseback. There were about 60 Apache warriors waiting for him up on the sides. So there were some up there, some over here, and they waited until all of them were in, and they started firing. But I think that this is where it happened. Just past this pinch point that's right behind me. So they got up here, they started shooting, and they had them trapped. And according to the report, in the first volley, they killed 32 horses. So the way that Apaches would fight, I think it started with Geronimo, I'm not really sure, but they always said shoot the horses first, because then they would be stranded. So they pretty much right away killed the horses. Then the Navajo scouts were killed, and there's a lot of debate on how many cavalry was killed, but you still had those other companies coming down on the other side of this. They were coming down the creek, and they heard the shooting, so they came up, and Victoria, somehow they knew that they were coming, so they held their fire until the other 2 companies were in, and then they let it fly again. Once they had that other group pinned down, so there's an estimated 75 depending on which account you read. So they're all pinned down here in the bottom, and so one company tried to go up around them on this side to flank them, and the Apaches, they waited until they were pretty much where they couldn't get back, and then they would start firing on them. So they were just completely they were just completely falling into their trap the whole time. Then another group went to the right, tried to flank them that way, and same exact thing happened. It started a little after 9 o'clock, and once it started getting dark, all the soldiers were down to 2 or 3 rounds apiece. They were losing, and they were ordered to withdraw, and they had a wounded soldier down in the bottom and a wounded soldier up on the side there, and Lieutenant Day pretty much risked his life, and he went and saved the one guy. Then somebody else saved the guy in the bottom, and they eventually snuck out at dark, but there were some people about to get court-martialed and stuff. And eventually they all made it out. Well, I shouldn't say that. The survivors made it out. And actually 3 people received the Medal of Honor from this canyon right here, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, if it's a lot of bullets flying. Lieutenant Day was somewhere up here whenever they told him to withdraw, and so he disobeyed orders. Then you had Hugo and Emmett. They were on this side and they were both pinned down, and they refused orders to withdraw. And then, like I said, there was a bunch of guys down here in the bottom pinned down, and so that's kind of how that played out. Like I said, most of them were both Buffalo soldiers. Actually, all of them were Buffalo soldiers. Yeah, I would not want to be trapped here. It's bad. Don't they always say take the high ground? Officially, there were 5 or 6 soldiers killed, 2 or 3 Navajo scouts, 1 civilian, and I think 36 or 38 horses. So that's what the report said. Unofficially, nobody really knows anymore, but I've heard numbers like 11 soldiers made it out. And we don't really know, or I don't know exactly how many soldiers were here. I've heard about 75. So just my guess, looking at where it's at, if you had 75 men pinned down, you'd be lucky to have 11 survive. Another way you can tell you're in the right spot is there's a little marker tucked away up there. Good thing is it's remote enough, no knucklehead's gonna come steal it. But this is right where the pinnacles are. So I highly recommend that you go read up about it. There's a lot of stories, different versions out there, but few things for certain. They chased them into this canyon. There were companies A and B, and then I think it was G and E followed suit. So the location, we're pretty positive this is it. The numbers, we don't really know. I finally climbed down off the mountain, so I'll come show you the memorial. This is where the debate comes in, and it's all about the number of graves, and so how many people were really involved. So this field right here, from what I understand, it was a field like that the Kelseys were actually farming. So we know that the Kelseys were here before that, and I don't know if they got ran out during the Apache Wars or if it was unrelated, but they wouldn't have buried them in their field if they were still farming it. On record, there are 32 graves here. Right now, and they look kind of like this. Right now, there are only 4. So I guess, from what I understand, there were graves kind of up here, but everything's been washed out, so they don't even know where the graves are exactly anymore. But like I said, officially there were 4, or there's 32. My uncles, they used to, when they were young, 10 and younger, they used to work cows through here, and my Uncle Jim, he remembers seeing 18 graves as a kid. Even me as a kid, I remember more than 4, but in more recent years, I can only remember 4. So I'm not really sure where the graves are, but these 4 are marked. That goes back to how many people actually died. The numbers don't add up because no Apaches died, according to the reports. So why were there so many graves if only 5 or 6 infantry or cavalry, and then the Navajo scouts? that kind of thing. Originally, so they were just graves. Then somebody wanted to fix that, so they put wooden crosses on them, and they were in rows. And then all those wooden crosses kind of got dilapidated. Then in 1997, they brought in the headstones and the plaques. And then in just the last couple years, so there used to be a wooden flagpole here, and it was kind of not very sturdy. So just the last couple years, they've been working on this slowly. There's a group of veterans, and I don't know if I should mention who they are. I don't know if they want to be on the internet or anything, but they saw the dilapidated pole and wanted to fix it. And so they've been coming in. They started, I think, in 2001, and they started coming in 2002. They come in about once, twice a year. Initially, they got permission to come up from the ladder, so they drove in, and Hamilton Construction donated the pole, and they hauled in concrete and stuff like that. Then they started hiking over either Cave Creek or East Curtis and coming in to work on it. And the actual idea was, they've been asking me to pack in stuff for a while, a couple of years now, and I told them I was coming, and they said they didn't need anything at this time, but eventually in the near future they're going to divert this because it's going to wash this out. So they're going to come in here and do some work and try to get the water diverted. They've been talking, so all of these are veterans, and some of them are even retired military, and they've been working with the Army. They actually think it's the Army's fault for not putting more effort into this memorial, but they're trying to get a helicopter to fly in here with ground penetrating radar to find all of the graves, which if the Army would do that, that would be awesome, but it'd be a pretty expensive feat. They're even trying to get National Guard to do a training and land a Black Hawk right here, and so they could use it as a training tool. But that's kind of more recent what's going on. I'm not going to bore you by my reading, but I'll try to get or I'll zoom in on these so that way you can pause the video and read them if you want to. So Unknown Soldier, September 18th. This one is Peter Haynes, J. Crump, John Johnson, Navajo Scouts. And then here's all the plaques that they've been putting on. So a timeline of this area. Restoration project. Consulting and planning. Ladder Ranch. All that stuff. And then some information on Fort Baird. Probably can't read it. They did send me with a new flag, but the clips are messed up. So they're kind of clipped and kind of put some P-cord on there. So that'll last about a week in the wind. But at least there's a new flag. I'll get this one back to the guys in charge of it. You might be surprised that I'm not just eating a burrito. It's kind of strange. Somebody forgot your hand truck. Last night while I was in my sleeping bag, because it gets dark at like 5 o'clock now, I felt something crawling on me. I smacked it, the spider, and I killed it. But then my eyes started hurting after that, so I got a spider bite in the eyeball. But I got to thinking about some stuff, and I think there's a few things that I need to clarify. So Day, Emmett, and Denny were the ones that received the Medal of Honor for this battle. The other thing is that Apache woman that was involved was Geronimo's sister. And then Victorio himself, he got killed in a battle in 1880 at the Battle of Tres Castillos. So there's a little backstory for both parties for here. But I'm just gonna head up the river, head up the creek. There are a few different ways to get here. The way that I am going is one of the longer ways. So you can go, the best way to go right now is through Hermosa, and you come over, you drop down Hell's Canyon, you end up just a little bit below the monument there. The other way, there's two ways on this side. You can go over Cave Creek, but last time I went on that trail was, I think it's 2017-ish, somewhere right around there. There's a couple washouts that are really bad, and my horses were having to slide down on their bellies, and I told myself I'd never go that way, which I haven't since then until they get that fixed, or until I go in there and fix it. The other way is East Curtis, which is this canyon right here. So there's some options to get here. Like I said, the way that I'm going is probably the furthest ride, more or less. But especially if you're gonna hike in, there's much shorter distances. I'm back at this set of corrals, which means I'm only about half a mile from the truck. So I guess I'll end it here. I did run into a part of a trail crew. They're scouting it out. They're gonna do some more trail work. And I saw a few deer, not a ton, some elk, but not a lot. Quail, quite a few quail in there. So all in all, it was a pretty good trip. I'd always heard that it was 12 miles in there, but I think it was just my dad lying to me to make it sound like it wasn't as far. I did the little tracker deal, which I usually don't do, and it's right at 14 miles, and I'm right at about 5 hours and 20 minutes or so. So we're averaging pretty good pace. There's about, I don't know, 3 or 4 mile section in there that's pretty rough and holding prong. If you're going over there to fish, which that's a pretty popular fishing place, the fish are really spotty and there's not a lot of them. So, and there's nothing down on the Animas, so kind of stay up higher and good luck to you. But other than that, thanks for watching, and thanks for making it to the end. We'll catch you on the next one. This morning I've been doing a little bit of predator calling and a little bit of glassing and just kind of checking things out like I normally do. And I got to thinking about some of the trips I've been in here. And I've actually been in here at least a dozen times over the years. So from when I was a really little kid, and we used to come in here for we used to fish this river a lot. This used to be a really good fishing spot. Now, after all the fires and it's been flooded, there's fish up higher, but there's no fish right here. And the first time I ever saw the monument, I don't know how old I was, probably 8 or 10, and we were fishing down the river, and I was with my dad, and I saw the flag, and I was surprised because we're in the middle of nowhere, and he kind of told me the story. And then I'd always thought about it, and we'd come in again and I would just kind of see the monument. And then it wasn't until I was 13 or 14, we packed in a professor from Western, and he was doing a documentary on the Buffalo Soldiers. And he's really the one that like opened my eyes to everything that went on here. And he explained like the different canyons and how there was a lot of confusion with which canyon it was. So this was probably 2001 to 2002, somewhere right in there. So that was a fun trip, and it was pretty, you know, informative for a kid. I really enjoy this area. It looks completely different because it's been burned, and the river's washed out and stuff. But the last time I was in here, I came in by myself in 2017, so it's not that long ago. And I came over Cave Creek, and it was so bad that there's a couple places where I had to go around some big washout on a steep hill, and the horses they were literally sliding. I didn't know they were going to do that at the time, or I wouldn't have gone, but they were like sliding down on their bellies. And then we had to climb up the other side. I had a bow with me, and I broke some arrows, and it was just a pretty rough trip. So I said I wasn't going to do that anymore, and I hadn't, and that's why I haven't been in here in a while. But they just got this trail opened up just a month ago, and so that's why I decided to come down here. But there's a ton of history in this area, ton of family history in this area, like a lot of family experiences. My granddad ranched this. Like I said earlier, my Uncle Vance and Uncle Jim, they worked cows in here when they were kids. So it's just a cool area, and hopefully that trail stays open so I can keep coming in here. You know, it's the Gila. There's nothing else like it. They're doing a documentary on the Buffalo Soldiers, and the funny thing was, we came over Cave Creek, and when we got into the Animas, there was a buffalo. And so they thought it was symbolic because they were doing Buffalo Soldier stuff. And it was there was a bull from the ladder that had just come up and just kind of got loose from down there. And they came in, they did their documentary. The funny thing is that buffalo, when we got back, my dad called the ladder, and they said that bull had been getting loose, and he just walked through fences. So somebody else we knew bought it for market price, and they came in here and shot it. So that was kind of cool, like hunting a buffalo in the Gila, even though it was domestic buffalo, but it was kind of cool. So that was a pretty fun trip.